Commander Laura Mitchell stared at the holographic display, her eyes narrowing at the strange energy readings coming from beyond Pluto's orbit. Something wasn't right. The patterns didn't match any known human spacecraft or natural phenomenon. She took a sip of her cold coffee and leaned closer to the screen. "Commander, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Peter Barnes from his monitoring station. The energy signature just doubled in intensity. Laura walked quickly to his station, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor of Earth Defense Force's main control room. The massive underground facility in Colorado housed humanity's first line of defense against potential space threats. Until now, their job had mainly involved tracking space debris and monitoring for solar flares. "Show me the numbers," she said, placing a hand on the back of Peter's chair. The lieutenant pulled up a new screen showing rapidly changing figures. "Whatever it is, it's big. And there's more than one of them." Before Laura could respond, every alarm in the control room began blaring. Red warning lights flashed across the walls as more energy signatures appeared on their screens. The room erupted into controlled chaos as technicians and officers rushed to their stations. "All stations, report," Laura commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "Multiple objects just appeared at the edge of our solar system," reported Catherine Wells, their chief military strategist. "They're moving at speeds we've never seen before. Definitely not natural objects." Laura reached for the secure communication line to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "This is Commander Mitchell. We have a potential first contact scenario. I repeat, potential first contact." Within minutes, the facility's main screen lit up with a transmission. The image showed a tall, humanoid figure with metallic blue skin and eyes that seemed to glow from within. When it spoke, its words were automatically translated by their computers. "This is High Commander Zextal of the Zentari Empire. Your solar system now falls within our expansion zone. Prepare for integration into our empire or face immediate elimination." The room fell silent. Laura exchanged glances with Peter and Catherine. Humanity had long prepared for first contact, but not like this. Not with an immediate threat. "High Commander," Laura responded, keeping her voice steady. "We are a sovereign species. We do not accept forced integration. We request peaceful dialogue." The Zentari commander's expression showed what looked like amusement. "Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are obsolete. You have no choice in this matter. You have 6 Earth hours to surrender control of your military facilities." The transmission ended abruptly. Laura immediately turned to Catherine. "What are we dealing with?" Catherine's fingers flew across her console. "Their ships are massive, each one bigger than anything we've ever built. Energy readings suggest weapons we can't even understand. Their smallest ship could probably take out half a continent." "But they're giving us 6 hours," Peter interjected, his mind already working on possibilities. "Why give us time if they're so superior?" Laura pulled up the sensor data from the Zentari ships. Something about their formation caught her eye. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "Their ships are arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. Every movement they make follows precise mathematical formulas." Catherine moved closer to study the data. "You're right. It's like they're following a textbook. There's no variation, no adaptation to terrain or conditions." "Run a simulation," Laura ordered. "I want to see how they respond to different scenarios." Peter quickly set up a computer simulation, throwing various defensive strategies against the Zentari formation. Each time, the alien ships responded with mathematically perfect maneuvers. Their responses were incredibly advanced, but completely predictable. "They're fighting like machines," Laura muttered. "All technology, no instinct." "That's it," Peter exclaimed. "Commander, look at human military history. We developed our tactics through thousands of years of warfare. Different terrains, different weapons, different strategies. We learned to be unpredictable because we had to fight enemies who thought like we did." Laura's eyes widened with understanding. And the Zentari, they might have advanced so fast technologically that they never developed that tactical diversity. Catherine pulled up historical battle records. The Spanish Armada, the Battle of Thermopylae, Vietnam, guerrilla warfare. Humans have always found ways to defeat superior forces through unconventional tactics. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," Laura commanded. "I think I know how we can fight back." The next few hours were a blur of activity. While the world's governments prepared for possible evacuation scenarios, Laura and her team developed a strategy that seemed insane on paper. They would use humanity's greatest weakness, their technological inferiority, as their greatest strength. Just before the 6-hour deadline, Laura sent a message to the Zentari fleet. "High Commander, we have a response to your demand." The blue-skinned alien appeared on screen again. "Your surrender is accepted." "Not quite," Laura replied with a slight smile. "We have a counteroffer. You claim we're primitive. Let's test that theory. One of your ships against one of ours. If you win, we'll surrender. If we win, you leave our solar system." The Zentari commander laughed, the sound oddly mechanical. "You challenge us to combat with your primitive technology. Very well. We accept. It will serve as an excellent demonstration for other species who might consider resistance." Laura nodded to Peter, who transmitted the coordinates for the battle. They had chosen a location in the asteroid belt, a messy, chaotic environment that their simulations showed the Zentari actively avoided. The Earth ship chosen for the battle was the EDF Cunningham, commanded by Captain Andrew Ross. It was humanity's newest vessel, but it looked like a toy compared to the Zentari battleship it would face. As the two ships approached the asteroid belt, Laura watched the tactical display with held breath. Everything depended on their theory being right. The Zentari ship moved with precise, calculated grace, its advanced weapons powering up. But Captain Ross had studied ancient naval warfare, particularly submarine tactics. The Cunningham dove into the asteroid field, using the Space Orcs as cover, deliberately stirring up debris clouds that confused the Zentari sensors. "Their targeting systems are too perfect," Peter observed. "They're trying to calculate exact trajectories in an environment where that's impossible." The Zentari ship fired its weapons, but the shots were too precise, too perfect. They hit exactly where the Cunningham had been a second before, but never where it was. Ross was flying his ship like an old World War II destroyer, making unpredictable moves that no algorithm could anticipate. Then came the moment they had planned for. The Cunningham emerged from behind a large asteroid at an angle that looked like a mistake. The Zentari ship, following its perfect tactical programming, moved to capitalize on the apparent error. It was exactly what Ross wanted. The Cunningham fired its magnetically accelerated rounds, simple, kinetic weapons that needed no complex targeting systems. In the debris-filled environment, where energy weapons were scattered and diffused, the old-fashioned slugs hit their target with devastating effect. The Zentari ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, hadn't been configured to repel simple kinetic impacts. The damage wasn't severe, but it was enough to prove their point. The control room erupted in cheers as the Zentari ship withdrew. High Commander Zextel's face appeared on their screen again, but this time without its previous arrogance. "Impossible," the alien commander stated. "Your tactics, they defy strategic logic." "No," Laura replied. "They defy your strategic logic. This is just the beginning of what we can do. Still want to test our primitive species?" There was a long pause before the Zentari commander spoke again. "We will reevaluate the status of your solar system. This encounter has been educational." As the Zentari fleet withdrew, Laura looked around at her team. "They'll be back," she said. "And next time, they'll bring more ships. But now we know something important. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Peter nodded, already pulling up more historical battle tactics on his screen. "They may have better technology," he said, "but we have something they don't. Thousands of years of learning how to fight against all odds. And that," Catherine added with a smile, "is an advantage they can't calculate." Laura looked back at the tactical display, where the Zentari ships were disappearing into deep space. Humanity had won its first space battle, not through superior technology, but through the accumulated wisdom of countless earthly conflicts. It was just the beginning, but it was a beginning that proved one thing. In the space age, humanity's primitive past might be its strongest asset for the future. 2 weeks after humanity's first encounter with the Zentari, Catherine Wells sat in her office surrounded by old military history books. The walls of her small room at the Earth Defense Force headquarters were covered with maps showing famous naval battles throughout history. She hadn't slept properly in days, but she knew she was onto something important. A knock on her door made her look up. Commander Laura Mitchell stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you could use this," Laura said, walking in and placing 1 cup on Catherine's desk. "What have you found?" Catherine picked up an old book about World War II naval tactics. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," she said, her eyes bright with excitement despite her tiredness. "Everyone's been trying to figure out how to match their technology. But what if we don't need to?" She opened the book to a marked page showing submarine warfare tactics. "Look at this. During World War II, submarines changed everything about naval combat. They didn't win because they were the most advanced ships. They won because they changed how the battle was fought." Laura leaned in, looking at the diagrams. "And you think we can apply this to space combat?" "Space isn't that different from the ocean," Catherine explained, pulling up a holographic display of the solar system. "We have different depths, orbital planes. We have currents, solar winds, and gravitational fields. We have terrain, asteroid fields, and planetary gravity wells." Before Laura could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Peter Barnes's voice came over the intercom. "Commander Mitchell to the control room immediately." Zentari ships detected approaching the outer solar system. Laura and Catherine rushed to the control room, where dozens of red dots on the main screen showed an incoming Zentari fleet. This time, they had brought 3 times as many ships as before. "They're not here to talk this time," Peter said as they entered. "Their weapons are already powered up." Captain Andrew Ross, who had won the first battle against the Zentari, joined them through a video link from his ship. "The Cunningham is ready, Commander, but we can't pull the same trick twice. They'll be expecting our asteroid field tactics." Catherine stepped forward. "Captain, what do you know about Operation Rheinbung?" Ross's eyes lit up with recognition. "The Nazi battleship Bismarck's operation in World War II." "Yes, but I'm more interested in how it was stopped," Catherine said. She quickly typed commands into the main console, bringing up historical images. The British used outdated biplanes, swordfish torpedo bombers. They were so slow and primitive that the Bismarck's advanced targeting systems couldn't effectively track them. Laura caught on immediately. "You want to use our supposed weakness as strength again, but differently this time." "Exactly," Catherine said. "Captain Ross, how quickly can you power down your ship's energy systems?" Ross looked confused for a moment, then smiled as he understood. "You want us to go dark, like submarines going silent." Over the next hour, Catherine laid out her plan. The Earth Defense Force had 30 ships available, all of them technically inferior to even the smallest Centauri vessel. But that didn't matter if they changed the rules of engagement. Laura took the plan to the Joint Chiefs, who approved it despite its risks. They had no better options. As the Zentari fleet approached Mars orbit, humanity launched its counterattack. But instead of meeting the aliens head-on, the Earth ships split into 3 groups, each using different historical tactics. The first group, led by Captain Ross, powered down almost everything except life support and minimal propulsion. They drifted like dead ships, nearly invisible to the Zentari's energy-base sensors. The second group, commanded by Captain Lisa Howard, used an old Viking battle formation, seemingly exposing their flanks in an invitation to attack. The third group, under Captain Greg Martinez, appeared to flee toward Jupiter, drawing a portion of the Zentari fleet into pursuit. The Zentari commander's voice came through their communications. Your primitive evasion tactics are futile. Surrender now, and we will be merciful." Laura didn't respond. She watched as the Zentari fleet split up, just as Catherine had predicted they would. Their tactical computers would tell them it was the most efficient way to catch all three groups of Earth ships. "Now," Catherine said quietly. Captain Ross's dead ships suddenly came to life, but not with energy weapons. They launched thousands of small, simple metal balls, space grapeshot, inspired by ancient naval cannons. The balls didn't need to be precisely aimed. There were simply too many of them to dodge. The Zentari ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were overwhelmed by the physical impacts. Several smaller ships suffered significant damage. At the same time, Captain Howard's group executed a perfect crossing the T maneuver, an ancient naval tactic where a line of ships crosses in front of an enemy column, allowing all ships to fire while the enemy can only use their forward weapons. The Zentari ships, programmed to fight in 3 dimensions, had failed to protect themselves from this simple 2-dimensional attack. Captain Martinez's group reached Jupiter's strong gravitational field and used it for a slingshot maneuver, something the Zentari ships, with their reliance on powered flight, didn't expect. The human ships swung around behind their pursuers, catching them in a crossfire. In the control room, Peter watched the tactical display with amazement. "It's working," he said. "Their formations are breaking up." The Zentari ships began to move erratically, their perfect geometric patterns dissolving as they tried to adapt to attacks their tactical computers couldn't predict. Several ships collided with each other as they attempted to evade the simple but effective human attacks. "Their technology is actually working against them," Catherine explained. "Their computers can't process our primitive tactics because they're too simple. They're looking for complex solutions to simple problems." The battle lasted for 3 hours. When it was over, 5 Zentari ships had been destroyed, and many others were damaged. The Earth Defense Force had lost only 3 ships, and most of their crews had managed to escape in lifeboats. The Zentari fleet retreated again, but this time there was no transmission, no threats. They simply disappeared back into deep space. Laura turned to Catherine. "You did it. You found a way to beat them." Catherine shook her head. "We all did it. We just remembered something they forgot. Sometimes the old ways work best because they've been tested by time." Peter pulled up a new display showing the battle analysis. "Look at this," he said. "Every time we used a historical tactic, their response time got slower. It's like their tactical computers were getting overwhelmed trying to find complex counters to our simple attacks." "They'll adapt," Laura warned. "Next time, they'll have countermeasures for these tactics." "Of course they will," Catherine agreed. "But that's the beauty of it. We have thousands of years of military history to draw from. How many tactics do you think we can come up with?" Captain Ross's voice came over the comm system. "As many as we need, I'd say. When do we start planning for their next attack?" Laura looked at her team and smiled. "Right now." "Catherine, what other history books do you have in that office of yours?" As they walked back to Catherine's office, Laura thought about how strange it was. Humanity had just won its second space battle, not by advancing technology, but by reaching back to its past. The Zentari might have better ships, better weapons, and better computers, but humans had something that couldn't be built in a shipyard. They had history, experience, and the ability to think beyond mathematical perfection. The war was far from over, but they had found their edge. Now they just had to sharpen it. Dr. Susan Carter stood in the wreckage of a crashed Zentari scout ship, her hand running along its smooth metallic surface. The ship had gone down in the Nevada desert during the last battle, and now it was providing valuable insights into their enemy's technology. "This is incredible," she said into her recorder. "Their entire ship seems to be controlled by a single AI system. There's no manual backup, no redundancy. They rely completely on their technology." Her research team had spent 3 weeks studying the wreckage. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of their adversaries and their weaknesses. Operations Director Matthew Phillips watched from a few feet away, his tablet displaying real-time updates from their orbital defense network. "How does this help us, Dr. Carter?" Susan pointed to what appeared to be the ship's. "Their sensors are overwhelmed," Peter reported, watching the tactical display. "They're splitting up to investigate each signal." Laura nodded to Catherine. Time for Phase 2. Earth's ships had been modified based on Susan's research. They now carried electromagnetic pulse weapons, simple technology, but effective against the Zentauri's over-reliant AI systems. The battle that followed wasn't like anything in human military history. Earth ships darted between asteroids, launching quick attacks before disappearing again. The Zentauri's superior weapons were useless if they couldn't get a clean shot. "They're starting to bunch up," Catherine observed. "Their programming is telling them to protect each other's technology." "Spring the trap," Laura ordered. Captain Howard's ship led a group of Zentauri vessels into a dense part of the asteroid belt. When they were in position, she gave the signal. Hundreds of EMP charges detonated at once. The electromagnetic pulses weren't strong enough to completely disable the Zentauri ships, but they disrupted their AI systems. Without their computer assistance, the alien crews struggled to control their own vessels. "Look at that," Matthew said, pointing to the tactical display. "They can barely maneuver. They've relied on their AI for so long, they don't know how to fly manually." The Earth ships pressed their advantage. Using simple projectile weapons and coordinated attacks, they picked off the confused Zentauri vessels one by one. Some of the alien ships even collided with asteroids, their crews unable to navigate without AI assistance. Susan watched the battle with growing excitement. "This isn't just about technology anymore," she said. "This is about understanding your tools." The Zentauri let their technology think for them. They forgot that sometimes you need to think for yourself. After 6 hours of combat, the remaining Zentauri ships retreated. Earth had won its most significant victory yet, destroying 12 enemy vessels while losing only 2 of their own. In the aftermath, Laura gathered her team for a debriefing. "This was a major victory," she said, "but it's not over. The Zentauri will adapt again." "Let them," Catherine replied. "Every time they adapt, they become more predictable. They can only respond in ways their technology allows. We can respond in any way we can imagine." Matthew nodded. "And now we know their greatest weakness. They're prisoners of their own advancement. They'd forgotten how to do things the hard way. The hard way is sometimes the best way." Susan added, "Humans never forgot that. We still know how to fight without computers. We still know how to think without AI. That's our real advantage." Laura looked at the tactical display, where the dots representing the retreating Zentauri fleet were disappearing into deep space. "We're not just fighting with older tactics," she said. "We're fighting with older wisdom. The Zentauri found their technology. We earned ours. And that makes all the difference." As the team dispersed to begin preparations for the next inevitable battle, Laura stayed behind in the control room. She pulled up an image from the crashed Zentauri ship, its sleek, perfect design a stark contrast to the utilitarian human vessels. Sometimes, she murmured to herself, the strongest weapon isn't the most advanced one. It's the one you truly understand how to use. The victory had cost them, but it had proven something important. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology, but in its ability to think beyond it. The Zentauri had forgotten that lesson long ago, trading their initiative for automation. It was a mistake the humans, with their long history of fighting against the odds, would never make. Admiral Richard Hayes stood before the holographic display in the war room, studying an ancient text displayed alongside the latest battle plans. The book was The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and its wisdom, though thousands of years old, was about to be applied to humanity's first major offensive against the Zentauri. "Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting," he read aloud, then looked up at Commander Maria Rodriguez. "How do we break an enemy that relies entirely on logic and computers?" Maria smiled, pointing to another section of the battle plan. "We make them question their own logic, Admiral. We make their greatest strength become their greatest weakness. The plan they had developed was called Operation Checkmate. After months of defensive battles, humanity was finally ready to take the fight to Zentari space. Dr. Susan Carter's research had revealed the location of several key Zentari bases, and now they had a chance to strike back. All ships report ready, Admiral, Peter Barnes announced from his station. The Earth Defense Force had grown. They now had over 100 ships, many of them incorporating captured Zentari technology in new and unexpected ways. Begin Phase 1, Richard ordered. The first wave of Earth ships jumped into Zentari space, but they didn't attack. Instead, they began broadcasting on all frequencies, thousands of different signals, each containing different pieces of information. Some were military communications, others were civilian broadcasts, and many were simply noise. They're responding exactly as predicted, Catherine Wells reported, watching the Zentari fleet's movements. Their sensor networks are trying to analyze every signal. The Zentari ships moved to investigate the broadcasts, their formation spreading thin as they tried to track down each source. Their computers, programmed to gather and analyze all available data, couldn't ignore any of the signals. Now for Phase 2, Richard said. Commander Rodriguez's fleet emerged from hiding behind a nearby gas giant. Her ships had been modified based on Susan's research. They looked like Zentari vessels on sensors, but they moved like Earth ships. Unpredictable, aggressive, and completely contrary to Zentari battle doctrine. The enemy fleet's response was immediate and confused. Their tactical computers couldn't process the contradiction of ships that appeared friendly but acted hostile. Sun Tzu said, "All warfare is based on deception," Maria commented as she watched the Zentari ships hesitate. They're trying to figure out if we're friends or enemies, and their computers can't decide. The real attack came from a third direction. Captain Andrew Ross led a fleet of Earth's newest ships, each one carrying a mixture of human and adapted Zentari technology. They struck while the enemy was distracted, targeting the weak points Susan had identified in their ship's design. The Zentari are falling back, Peter reported. Their formation is breaking up. Richard nodded. They're not used to being attacked. They've been the aggressors for so long, they've forgotten how to defend. The battle spread across the star system as Earth's ships pressed their advantage. The Zentari's sophisticated targeting systems struggled to track opponents that didn't follow any predictable pattern. Some human ships flew like World War I fighters, others like modern jets, and still others used maneuvers that had never been tried before in space. "Look at their response times," Catherine said, pointing to her tactical display. "Every time we do something unexpected, they have to run it through their combat computers. By the time they decide how to react, we've already moved on to something else." The turning point came when Maria's fleet targeted a major Zentari command center. Instead of attacking directly, they used a strategy inspired by ancient naval warfare. Her ships launched clouds of small automated drones, each one broadcasting different signals and moving in random patterns. "Their sensors are completely overwhelmed," Susan reported, monitoring the Zentari communications they could intercept. "They can't tell which targets are real and which are decoys." The Zentari command center, unable to process the chaotic flood of information, began shutting down its sensor systems to prevent overload. That was exactly what Maria had been waiting for. Her ship struck from multiple angles, using simple kinetic weapons that didn't require complex targeting systems. The Zentari base, with its most sophisticated defenses temporarily blind, couldn't respond effectively. "Command center is heavily damaged," Peter announced. "They're losing coordination across their entire fleet." Richard watched as the Zentari ships began to move independently, each one trying to fight its own battle without central coordination. It was exactly what they had hoped for. "Their greatest weakness," he said quietly, "is that they forgot how to think for themselves. Each ship is waiting for instructions from a computer that can't handle what we're throwing at it." The battle lasted for another 2 hours, but the outcome was clear. Without their central command structure, the Zentari ships fell one by one to Earth's more adaptable tactics. Some retreated, while others fought on with increasingly desperate and predictable moves. When it was over, humanity had won its first major offensive victory. They had destroyed a key Zentari base and proved they could take the fight to enemy territory. In the aftermath, Richard gathered his commanders for a debriefing. "This victory is important," he said, "but its true value isn't in the damage we did. It's in what we proved." Maria nodded. "We proved they can be beaten in their own territory, using their own technology against them." "More than that," Susan added. "We proved that their way of fighting, pure logic, pure computation, has fundamental flaws. Human unpredictability isn't just an advantage. It's a weapon they can't defend against." Catherine pulled up the battle analysis on the main screen. "Look at this. Every time we introduced a new variable, a different fighting style, an unexpected tactic, their response time got longer. Their computers were trying to find perfect solutions to problems that didn't have perfect solutions. And that's why we'll win this war," Richard said, picking up his copy of The Art of War. "Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we understand something they've forgotten. War isn't just about technology. It's about wisdom, creativity, and the human spirit." As the commanders dispersed to prepare for their next operations, Richard stayed behind, looking at the tactical display showing their victory. The Zentari had built their entire civilization on technology they hadn't developed themselves, relying on computers to do their thinking for them. But humanity had kept its fighting spirit, its creativity, and its ability to think beyond the expected. They had won this battle not just with ships and weapons, but with the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of human warriors. And that was something no computer could match. Fleet Admiral Daniel Carter looked out at the vast array of ships gathered near Mars' orbit. The combined fleet of Earth's space forces represented everything humanity had learned during the war with the Zentari. Each ship was unique. Some carried modified alien technology, others used purely human designs, and many combined both in ways the Zentari would never expect. Final status report. He called out to his command staff aboard the flagship EDF Liberty. Commander Laura Mitchell, recently promoted for her role in the early battles, stepped forward. "All fleet elements report ready, Admiral. We've confirmed the Zentari are gathering their forces for what looks like their biggest push yet. They're bringing everything they have," Catherine Wells added from her tactical station. "Over 300 ships. They're desperate to end this war." Daniel nodded. The past 6 months had changed everything. Humanity had pushed the Zentari back repeatedly, using a combination of stolen technology and unpredictable tactics. Now the aliens were planning one final massive attack to crush Earth's resistance. "Dr. Carter, are you ready with the surprise we discussed?" Daniel asked. Susan Carter, now head of Alien Technology Integration, smiled from her station. "Ready, Admiral. Every ship in the fleet has been equipped with the new system. The Zentari won't know what hit them." The new system was brilliant in its simplicity. Susan had discovered that the Zentari ships relied on complex algorithms to predict enemy movements, so she had developed a device that made human ships appear to be in slightly different positions than they actually were, just enough to make the Zentari computers miscalculate. "Multiple jump signatures detected," Peter Barnes announced. "Zentari fleet is arriving." The enemy ships appeared in perfect formation, a massive geometric pattern that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. Their lead ship was bigger than anything they'd seen before, clearly their new flagship. A transmission came through on all channels. The face that appeared was familiar. High Commander Zextal, the same Zentari who had demanded Earth's surrender in their first encounter. "Humans," he said, his voice carrying a hint of respect that hadn't been there before. "You have proven to be worthy opponents, but this ends today. Surrender now, and we will spare your planet." Daniel stepped forward. "We have a counter-proposal, High Commander. Look at your battle history since this war began. Every time you've fought us, you've lost ships. Every time you've adapted your tactics, we've adapted faster. Are you sure you want to risk your entire fleet today?" There was a pause before Zextal responded. "Our technology is superior. Our tactics are perfect. We cannot be defeated." "Perfect is the enemy of good enough," Daniel replied, quoting an old Earth saying. "You're about to learn it the hard way." The battle began with the Zentari fleet advancing in their characteristic perfect formation. But Earth's ships didn't form up to meet them. Instead, they scattered in what looked like complete chaos. "Execute Operation Legacy," Daniel commanded. Earth's fleet split into 5 groups, each one using tactics from a different era of human warfare. One group fought like ancient Roman triremes, another like World War I squadrons, a third like modern naval vessels, a fourth like guerrilla fighters, and the 5th used completely new space tactics. The Zentari computers tried to analyze and predict the movements of each group simultaneously. Combined with Susan's position-shifting devices, their targeting computers began to fail catastrophically. "Their formation is breaking up," Laura reported. "Their ships are trying to adapt to 5 different combat styles at once." The Zentari fleet split up to deal with each threat, exactly as planned. As soon as they did, Daniel gave the signal for Phase 2. Captain Lisa Howard led her ships in a maneuver that looked like a retreat, drawing a portion of the Zentari fleet away from their main force. Captain Andrew Ross's group appeared to do the same in another direction. The Zentari, programmed to pursue apparent advantages, took the bait. "They never learned," Catherine said, watching the tactical display. "Their computers still can't resist pursuing what looks like an easy victory." Once the Zentari fleet was split up, the trap was sprung. Earth's ships stopped running and turned to fight. Each group used different tactics, different weapons, and different strategies. The Zentari computers, trying to process and counter everything at once, began to lag. "Their response time is dropping," Peter reported. "Some ships are completely freezing up. Their computers can't handle the tactical overload." The battle turned into a series of smaller engagements, each one featuring a different style of combat. Where the Zentari expected energy weapons, they faced kinetic rounds. Where they predicted direct attacks, they encountered subtle maneuvers. Nothing happened the way their computers said it should. High Commander Zextal's voice came through again, this time with clear confusion. "This is impossible. Your tactics violate every principle of space combat." "No," Daniel replied. "They violate every principle of your space combat. We're not fighting your war. We're fighting humanity's war. All of humanity's wars, all at once." The turning point came when Susan activated her final surprise. The position-shifting devices suddenly changed frequency, making Earth's ships appear to multiply on Zentari sensors. Their computers, already struggling to process the variety of combat styles, began to crash. "Their flagship shields are down," Laura announced. "Their whole command and control network is failing." Daniel gave the order. "All ships, converge on their flagship. Show them everything we've got." Earth's fleet came together, each ship still fighting in its own unique way, but all focused on a single target. The Zentari flagship, the most advanced ship in their fleet, found itself under attack by centuries of human military tactics all at once. The result was devastating. Unable to predict or counter the overwhelming variety of attacks, the flagship's defenses failed. High Commander Zextal's ship began to drift, its sophisticated systems overwhelmed by the simple complexity of human warfare. "Zentari fleet is in full retreat," Catherine reported. "They're abandoning their flagship." A final transmission came from Zextal. "How? How can you fight like this? It defies all logic, all reason." "That's exactly the point," Daniel replied. "War isn't logical. It never has been. That's what you forgot, and what we remembered." The battle ended with the Zentari fleet in ruins. Dozens of their ships were destroyed, and many more had fled. Earth had suffered losses too, but they had achieved something unprecedented, a complete victory over a technologically superior force. In the aftermath, As damage reports came in and rescue operations began, Daniel gathered his command staff. "This victory belongs to all of humanity," he said. "Not just to us, but to every soldier, sailor, pilot, and warrior throughout our history. We won because we remembered their lessons." Laura nodded. The Zentari thought they could perfect warfare through technology. They forgot that war is fought by thinking, feeling beings, not by computers. And that's why they lost. Susan added. They had better ships, better weapons, better everything. But we had something they couldn't compute: the combined wisdom and creativity of thousands of years of human combat experience. As the Earth fleet regrouped and began the journey home, Daniel looked out at the stars. The war wasn't completely over. There would be more battles, more challenges. But they had proven something important. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology, but in its legacy. Every battle they had ever fought, every lesson they had ever learned, had led them to this victory. In the end, it wasn't advanced alien technology that had saved Earth. It was the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of human warriors, preserved and passed down through the ages, ready to be called upon when humanity needed it most.